For those of you I've not yet had the good fortune to meet, just to fill in a little bit, I'm Brad Love. I'm a GRIT co-founder and an oncology outcomes researcher. Our program today, as you know, is about giving voice to the often voiceless, advocate-led research in creating change. We'll open with some framing remarks, and then most of our time today will focus on a panel of 3 advocate researchers who are amplifying voices globally. People we have a ton to learn from and whose experiences we're going to enjoy hearing about. We're fortunate today to start with framing remarks from Michelle Weiss, Executive Vice President for Corporate Affairs at Bristol Myers Squibb, where her portfolio, incredibly relevant to us, includes patient advocacy and corporate social responsibility. And so I will turn it over momentarily to Michelle to frame our time together today and say thank you all for being here. And thank you, Michelle, for getting us off on the right foot.
Thanks, Brad. I'm really privileged to be here today and so happy to meet so many of you. I've joined Bristol Myers Squibb this year, and I'm really excited to learn about this community. I'm honored to be able to be joining you. I'm really impressed with how we've provided the space, how the Advocacy Exchange has provided the space for all of the advocates, the caregivers, patients, so all of the people that are able to come together and share these resources. I find it wonderful that there's a support community where people can come together and they actually can get the questions answered and find the hands reaching out to help them through some of the events in their life where they clearly need a little bit of support. So we've actually convened through this platform more than 70 advocacy groups from across disease states, across geographies, and we've connected thousands of individuals with the monthly live discussions. And through those really productive sessions, I think people have found answers to the questions and some of the help that they need. And these activities that are based on your input, all of you, have established the Advocacy Exchange as the largest cross-disease, cross-cultural initiative of its kind. Hugely impressive endeavor. And it actually exists as a living, breathing community. Whether you've been an advocate for 40 years or you're just starting your advocacy journey, it's become a place to regroup, to recharge, to reimagine what's possible. And then, we all work so tirelessly to advocate for ourselves in our communities. It's nice to have this community to come to. I find that the group is really about resiliency and it's about hope. The stories that are shared here and the connections that are made on this platform, they really matter. You never know what's going to get you through a day sometimes. And the stories that are here, whether you're a participant or a host, everybody contributes something, whether it's that lending hand of support. And you really just don't know who or how you touch people. And it could be the one thing that they needed that day to actually solve the problem or get them through. So the voices that are heard remind us that we're not alone in our work. And those discussions are what could keep anyone and everyone going. And so the idea of listening to this expert advocate voice is of great importance to us at the company. And this is why we have programs like our peer program, which stands for Patient Expert Engagement Resource. I have to think about that before I can get it right, because I always just call it the peer program. And this is why we have programs like this, to actively seek feedback from patient organizations so that we can apply their voice and embed their voice in everything that we do. And we can help them, have them help us shape these processes systematically and consistently throughout the entire product development and the commercialization continuum. So if you have that voice throughout it all, then we ensure that whatever comes out reflects those thoughts and feelings. And I know that sometimes it's easier said than done, but we can really learn from each other. What's worked, what hasn't worked, and that's what we're going to really be doing today when we listen to the speakers and we have a chance to go through this dialogue. Before we do so, though, I'd really like to start by briefly introducing our panel. They're all global healthcare experts. I was so impressed when I met them. Oh my goodness. But they'll share insights on what they've gained throughout the pandemic and how they're advocating for underrepresented communities. And so today we'll be joined by Alex, and Alex, I'm not going to try to get through your name, Philosivas, Dr. Roxana, Mehran, and Yasmin Ibrahim. So welcome all, and with that, I'll pass the virtual mic back to Brad to kick off our discussion.
Thank you. I really appreciate, I think we all really appreciate your points about resilience and hope. That these stories and connections and the chance to be bolstered by each other are really the key tools of the time we spend together here, and the key tools of advocacy and progress, if we're honest about it. That resiliency and hope is so essential to progress and change, of course. And fortunately, we could not be in better position, the three panelists we have today, to help us hear about the constructive effects of this kind of work that gives voice to the often voiceless. We'll start with having each panelist take a few minutes to do a personal introduction and map out a little bit of the context of their work. If we could, let's start with Alex Philosivas from the World Bladder Cancer Patient Foundation. Alex, could you take it away for a few minutes?
Thank you so much, Brad. And it's coalition, so it's World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition. Sorry for the correction. And first of all, I just wanted to say, Brad, if I can add another thing I'm grateful for is for the opportunity to be here today and to connect with all of you, and not only just share some of the work that we have been doing, but also learn from you, from my fellow panelists, and hopefully from the discussion today with all of you. So really, really grateful. Thank you. I'm joining you from Belgium. So I'm based in Brussels, Belgium, and I'm wearing a few hats that I'm kind of representing today. So I just thought I'd give you a brief introduction on that, and then elaborate a little bit more later on what we've been working on. So I'm the executive director of the World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition. And this is an international nonprofit kind of umbrella organization representing 11 bladder cancer patient groups in 8 countries at the moment. It's a fairly young organization, so we've been established since 2019. And as Brad mentioned through the chat discussions earlier, that it's my 2-year anniversary. So the time really just flew by. And I'm really happy to have been part of that growth and helping the organization grow. And the organization was patient driven and really driven from bladder cancer patient groups who saw the lack of support and information that was available around the world for people affected by bladder cancer. And that is how we came to be. And if I may touch, on the 3 areas that we're really focusing our work is of course awareness raising. Bladder cancer is the 10th most commonly diagnosed cancer in the world. In Europe, it's actually the 5th even, and yet awareness is incredibly low among the general population. So we really focus the efforts there to drive awareness, to make sure that we get people in and have earlier diagnosis as much as possible. Advocacy is another part, and today is an advocacy exchange as well. So this is a part where we're building up our capacity, and I will talk a little bit more about our research project that we'll be launching tomorrow, actually. So I'm very happy to share that. And the biggest part is actually fostering that community of bladder cancer patient advocates around the world. And that part is I would say the one that we spend so much effort of our time towards, and supporting these groups with different ways. Really, we're kind of learning with them as we go. And we have recently developed a startup guide for bladder cancer patient groups, which I think you can find on the event website, which is a resource we've developed together with our groups who have, started from an idea, and they are in different places now providing support for people affected by bladder cancer in their countries. And using that as a starting resource, an idea, and guide them through that journey together. And our vision, sort of a goal in a way, is that there is a bladder cancer patient group in every country, and that they are strong enough to support people affected by bladder cancer within those countries. So that is where a lot of our energy goes to. Then another one part of my role is I'm the president of Icahn International, and Icahn is a multi-stakeholder group that came together informally in about 2017. And last year, we finally became a nonprofit organization in legal terms. And the Icahn focuses on really reducing inefficiencies in cancer care from a perspective and focusing on things that matter most to patients. So really driving that patient perspective. And reducing inefficiency can have different meanings, and maybe I'll go in more detail, Brad, as part of the discussion, so I can allow other speakers as well to introduce themselves. And lastly, very briefly, the Global Cancer Coalitions Network. So this is something that came to be in light of the pandemic last year, together with 8 other global cancer advocacy organizations. We had a kind of connection, a call to get started, and we were all uncertain. There were so many things that were unknown last spring, and so this is where we gathered together. We shared our concerns, we shared our hopes, and we shared resources as well. And this has been a fantastic resource for the community and for the 750 organizations that collectively that coalition represents. And one of the projects I'll talk more about today is the survey report that we have published, which really looked at the impact of COVID on these cancer patient advocacy organizations around the world. So I'll stop there, Brad, and I'm very much looking to the discussion today, and please feel free to share questions in the chat. I'd be happy to follow up.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your leadership day to day. You're quite a coalition builder, so we're lucky to have you as part of this coalition. Next up, we have Dr. Roxana Mehran, who's Mount Sinai professor in cardiovascular clinical research and outcomes, as well as professor of medicine and population health science and policy at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, where she's internationally renowned, to put it mildly, as an interventional cardiologist. Roxana, could we ask you to introduce yourself for a few minutes?
Thank you so much, Brad. What a wonderful opportunity to be with an advocacy group and to have a dialogue and exchange of ideas and forming a coalition of making sure that we advocate for those who are not heard, for those who are not seen, for those who are not recognized. And for me, it's one of the most important things that before I go to bed every night, I think, who did I advocate for today? Did I? And what person, what place, what cause did I advocate for? And I think as a clinical trialist, it's incredibly important. We perform large-scale clinical trials that informs guidelines. I'm an interventional cardiologist, and I often think to myself, did we really explain this procedure to this patient well enough? Did we advocate for the patient's needs? Did we do what we were supposed to do for every one of the patients in this cath lab today? And I think this is the question that we need to do for ourselves on a daily basis to be sure that we are advocating. I believe that is, to me, I believe it's an important responsibility for all of us to be sure that we advocate for others. And I think that this forum is just a fantastic way for us to exchange some dialogue. I am a co-founder of Women as One, which is an organization that advocates for women in medicine. And I think it was very, very telling for us, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. And I don't want to take up too much of the time of introductions, but when I saw that women physicians were less likely to be introduced as doctor, that happened to me all the time. When I saw that women physicians were more likely to than male physicians to experience burnout, depression, suicidal ideation. When I saw that K awards and important awards weren't being given to women, and a lot of them were experiencing sexual harassment during their careers. And when I saw that nearly 50% of women cardiologists, including myself, were asked about their intention to have children during interviews for their jobs and careers. And when I saw that they were being paid more than $100,000 less than their male counterparts, I felt I needed to advocate for them. And so Women as One is an organization that does that. And I think if we look around, we will see lots and lots of unfairness and people who are not heard, seen, or recognized that we all can advocate for. So I'm so glad to be here with you, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Mehran. Your patients and the medical world and us today are lucky to have you. Thanks for sharing. Our third panelist is Dr. Yasmin Ibrahim, who is a public health leader at the Hepatitis B Foundation, where she leads the patient engagement program and supports people living with hepatitis B from around the world. Dr. Ibrahim, would you mind offering a small summary of your work?
Of course. Hello, everyone, and really thank you for having me as a speaker and panelist today, because I've been an attendee of this forum for quite some time now, and I was like always impressed, and now I get to also talk. So you can imagine how my heart is pounding now. So it is really great to be here today. I'm Yasmin Ibrahim. I am a public health manager at the Hepatitis B Foundation, and the Hepatitis B Foundation is a patient organization focusing on hepatitis B, like with the bladder cancer and all patient organizations. We do focus on awareness, advocacy, and education for healthcare providers and patients. But we also have a research arm. Our research arm is trying to find and working on finding a cure for hepatitis B. We also form lead the coalition, Hepatitis B United Coalition. It's a nationwide coalition for organizations that support people living with hepatitis B nationwide here in the United States. But we also support organizations globally and patients, people living with hepatitis B all over the world. Now, the project that I'll be explaining more in a few minutes was reaching out to people living with hepatitis B, trying to learn more about their lived experiences living with hepatitis B, whether it's the physical, the emotional, the social aspect, also their treatment journey. So many aspects of living with the disease, and the insights that we've gained from this were really eye-opener to many of the aspects that and the amount of work that really still needs to be done to empower people living with hepatitis B. Hepatitis B is it has a special thing, or this is how I see it probably, is it's unique in two aspects. First, it comes with major stigma and discrimination in many countries all over the world, and it also is in a way although it's not categorized this way, but it's kind of like an orphan disease. Less is done in this area. So we'll talk more about this, but I'm glad to be here today and share experiences and learn more from everyone today as well.
We really appreciate that work that humanizes our understanding of what, as you say, can so often be perceived as a silent disease. But the way forward is to hear people's voices and improve and change the way we care and the way we handle clinical practice. So I thank, of course, all three of you for the work you do daily to amplify voices. That is the theme of what we're here for today. And as Michelle mentioned a few minutes ago, your work fosters powerful advocacy. So as an opening prompt, I would love it, if you don't mind, if you could share a story or an anecdote of when you've seen the power of advocacy in your professional space, just to help us center ourselves. Please, Dr. Mehran.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And sorry to jump on that, because I think it's just wonderful to see that you, with small changes, you can make huge impact. And I think that is a really important message to take across. And to me, advocacy, while it seems like, wow, what am I really doing? It's just such a big mountain to climb. Any small help could move and make important and huge impact. And I'll give you an example of that with what we're doing in our foundation, Women as One, where we are really advocating for female physicians. Especially right now, we're focusing in cardiology because it's a very broken house of medicine where there's a lot of unequal and poor recruitment of women into the subspecialty of cardiology. And when we, on the other side, see that women are dying of heart disease as the #1 cause of their death, and we also know that women would be great doctors for women with heart disease. Women, if you see, in OBGYN, 90%, because this is a mostly all female, care, most of the caretakers are women. And as you can see, that it makes a big difference for them. And so how do we engage women to come into cardiology when they are seeing no leaders in the field, when it's a very, very anemic field for female leaders? And I think all of us as women could feel that way all around. And it's not just women, it's also women of color, where they're really absolutely almost non-existent in the subspecialty of cardiology, which is, by the way, one of the highest paid subspecialties in medicine. And so in what way are women repelled from this is because they're not part of the leadership. And if you all look inside of yourselves and say, how many female principal investigators and key opinion leaders and executive committee members did we have on our last 10 clinical trials? And the answer will be 0, 1, maybe 2. And it's not just BMS, it's in every company if you look at it. So I advocate that we've got to make that most important change to really push up these women, escalate them to where they belong, and give them that kind of a voice. And the way to do that is by having them start on some level and then having them move up. And we've done that. And a very short example of this is working with societies, and BMS is a very big supporter on one of the ACC clinical trial research group where we're training women and underrepresented minorities on clinical trial principles so that they could be well versed and they can be trained in that. So it makes a difference. And now we're seeing more and more of these women being promoted to those levels. Not enough. It's still very low. They're still not making it to the PI level. I can tell you, I have never been a principal investigator alone. And for some reason, for a clinical trial with one of the large pharma companies, for some reason, we can put you on an executive committee on a very, very good day. And I think that that all needs to change. And I'm not speaking for myself. I'm just saying there are women there who are talented, who could lead, but they're not being chosen. And we've got to work very, very hard for that. And I think it just takes a little bit of effort to make huge impact and massive changes across the board.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that and just the continued advocacy. And as you say, the need to engage with these systemic issues. And if we don't continue to advocate in those spaces, then there's so much less room for patient advocates or those willing to listen. It's all just powerfully connected. I'll open the same question to our other panelists. If you have please, Alex, a story that you'd be willing to share.
No, I'm happy to jump in. And Roxana, thank you so much for sharing that. I think bringing up the voices of women and bringing overall diversity across everything that we do is so important. And I'm so happy to see, across our coalition member organizations, we had such great leadership of women as CEOs, as presidents across these coalitions members that I work with every day. I was just thinking, what example I wanted to share, and you mentioned, me as a coalition builder. So I thought I had an example that I wanted to share from, how small actions and perseverance, I suppose, can lead to really, having an impact. And I would like to mention Andrew Winterbottom, who is one of our founders as person. And he was actually the founder of one of our member organizations, Fight Bladder Cancer UK, which was founded about 13 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And that came from, he was diagnosed with bladder cancer himself, and he had no one to turn to. No, I've never heard of bladder cancer. I've never met a person with bladder cancer, and didn't have information to go for. And that kind of drive led him to find another person to connect with. And this is how, Fight Bladder Cancer UK started, from a small group. I think they started off with a Facebook group, as something as small as that, connecting people. And now it's from our community, that's the biggest Facebook group, or sort of a forum platform of exchange among the patients with bladder cancer around the world within our community. They have 5,000 plus people that turn there every day and talk, share the stories and support each other. And this is how it kind of built up, and then he didn't stop there, and we had he kind of spilled out into Europe from the UK, in another organization I used to work with, actually, in European Cancer Patient Coalition, where he really drove that bladder cancer patient voice and awareness and activities within that organization, and we had a small working group on that, patient advocates from several countries, and slowly that kind of, I suppose, a coalition already brewed into something bigger. And for about, I would say, maybe 5 years or so that it took to reach that place 3 years ago, when we were actually finally established as an organization. But it required that drive and little steps. And I think that is one of the more important things that we maybe forget along the way. I certainly do sometimes. That every day, I think what Roxana, you have mentioned, right? Why did I advocate? Who did I advocate for today? And I think if we remind ourselves of that, and with every step that we do, we're leading to something greater. And then, reflecting on what Andrew's vision was, maybe, 13 years ago when he founded Fight Bladder Cancer, it led to the establishment of World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition. And our biggest mission is to develop strong patient groups on the ground that we are currently working with. And I'm hoping next year we'll be able to launch some of them officially off the ground. And I'm sure he would be absolutely proud of it. And he was there for the launch. He sadly died shortly after, but he was there. He saw that vision through. And so this is something that inspires me every day and gives me energy to continue with that mission. So that is the example that I wanted to share with you, because it's so close to my heart and so close to our community of bladder cancer patients.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I think unfortunately everybody here has a story close to their heart, or they wouldn't do the work every day, right? Thank you for sharing yours. Dr. Ibrahim.
Yeah, I totally relate as well, and I think one of the experiences that I think would be nice to share and see, kind of like, because sometimes we advocate for those who need the voice, as you said, and or those who are the voiceless, but we probably see success. We see a policy being developed here, decision been made there, but we don't really see sometimes the end line, or how the ultimate beneficiary kind of like really that impacts their lives. And the experience I would like to share is a very heartful email and letter that came from one of the fathers of a person who their daughter wanted to be a nurse, and she had she was living with chronic Hep B, and as we know, the CDC recommends that all those living with chronic hepatitis B can be healthcare professionals. There is no need to exclude them from being a doctor, a nurse, and despite there's a policy and law to protect, because people don't know, and because sometimes these are missed along the lines, the interpretation of these policies and regulations, and they were having hard time because the school wanted to exclude her. Anyway, we worked with the school, we worked with the parents, and the email and letter we received lately was her graduation as an RN, and that was kind of like one of the reminders that what you do really matters, is that people eventually can achieve their dreams and achieve their potential if they are empowered with knowledge, empowered with information, been provided the right tools. And it was just one of the happy moments or happy endings that you can actually see and materialize and visualize the impact of what you do, and reminds you and gives you power actually to keep on.
Yeah, I love that point about where it gives the power, right? By being part of that community, supporting each other fundamentally. Thinking about what each of you just shared, and this whole group's interest in focus, in leading progress and change. If we gave you a magic wand, if we just took as a thought experiment, a magic wand, what systemic changes would you like to see in each of your spaces to improve the situations in your communities? How do we capacity build in your spaces? Please, Dr. Mehran.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the first things that all of us have to do is training, and I would call it in implicit bias training. I think we're all biased. Every single one of us are biased, and it doesn't make us bad people. It's just the way our brain is wired. And in order to change the biased thoughts, the biased behavior, we have to be trained not once, not twice, but in continuous training to develop new synapses and new highways, the way our brain thinks and the way our brain takes impressions on people, places, things. If we don't do this, we will constantly continue to be biased towards a certain group or people or persons or whatever, and we will not be able to get to where we are and we'll have many more people that we'd have to advocate for because we're just not making the changes that we're looking for. So I believe wholeheartedly that all of us need to be trained on a continuous level on implicit bias training as one step forward.
Yeah, I can appreciate that for each of us to take a share of the burden and reframe how we go about the world so that we can be part of the change. Give him, please, Dr. Ibrahim.
We need 10 magic wands, but if I only have one, I would go on with the also education and awareness track, but I would probably provide awareness and education to the direct community and family and caregivers of those living with hepatitis B. In our space, it's often an issue that they can't even express themselves or what they experience to their loved ones. If I can share a very minor true story. One of the in-depth interview participants that we had last year, she was discussing how she is brave, she goes along with, tries to embrace, go on regular monitoring, does everything right that she needs to do. And but every time she goes to do these lab tests to make sure that everything is okay, the ultrasound, it's like one of these dreadful moments until she receives all the results, understandably. And I asked her, do you get to talk about this with anyone in your family or your husband? And she says, no. We don't talk about it at all. And possibly in the husband's mind, he's being supportive by not talking about the disease because probably he doesn't want her to feel uncomfortable or this is an issue in their life. And she probably on the other side actually needs to talk about it. So it was a moment that even touched me so deeply that same day I went to my husband and told him, please, let's talk about anything in life that happens. Let's just not keep it aside and just pretend it's not there or anything. So I think awareness and education of even the family members of those who are living with the disease, who need to talk about their illness, this is important. We always talk about educating the patients, educating the healthcare providers, but actually also the caregivers, the family members, the close circle, they need to be educated as well on how to psychologically take care of their loved ones.
Yes. Oh, what an essential thing to say out loud. Thank you for sharing that. As we're seeing in the chat, and as Nancy Farrow from Epic Experiences, who is always such a powerful member of our community, points out that exactly as you say, it's people sometimes trying to protect each other by not acknowledging fears. But conversely, when it's right for an individual or a caregiving unit, the sharing can also really be what they need and be powerful. But we don't always have the skills necessarily. That might be one of our next questions. Alex, I'd like to pass the magic wand question to you, if I might.
Thank you, Brad. I was thinking about that, and I think in our community, it's such a young community in a way in bladder cancer patient advocacy, and I think that there's so many unmet needs across the world. But if I could just use the magic wand, I would build on what Dr. Mehran and Dr. Ibrahim said on training, and I would just give them all confidence to get out there, not just patients themselves to advocate, to speak up for themselves, to advocate for themselves, but anyone within our advocacy community to get out there and be confident enough to give that voice and elevate that patient voice. And I think this is one of the areas why we want to do research, right? And with the patient survey and bladder cancer patient community that we're launching tomorrow, for example, is really we have the conversations with patients, especially our member organizations on the ground, every day. They know how patients feel, but then we need, in advocacy, we need to elevate that. We need to kind of quantify it and drive change, meaningful change for patients, for bladder cancer patients in this case, in my community. And so I think it's really that confidence is important, and the understanding the power of that voice that we have. And I just would like to requote one of my colleagues from South Africa, Lauren Pretorius. She said so beautifully at our World Bladder Cancer Patient Forum a week ago, that as patient advocates, we are quite rare. We are quite a rare thing. And so we have every reason to do the best in our power to give patients voice and create those environments where patients feel comfortable and confident and empowered to share their experience, and then take that and use it for a good cause to make a difference to their lives. So I would say, yeah, if Magic Wand could give me one wish, I would say let's give all patient advocates the confidence in their power.
That's a wonderful transition and wonderfully said, Alex, to actually a question in the chat that I'd like to share from Anne-Marie Moretis, who directed the question initially at Dr. Ibrahim, but I think all three of you are going to have input on this one, to specifically ask what ways you've found to hold ourselves accountable, to keep our eyes, ears, mind open to the daily opportunities to notice those within our communities that need an advocate. Because as Alex just offered as a wonderful point of transition, and as Anne-Marie is bolstering, because it is 100% true, people can be marginalized enough that we need to seek them out instead of waiting for them to ask, because the asking can be an additional burden to people who are already really burdened. So to reframe that, Dr. Ibrahim, as a simpler question, what ways have you found to keep the focus here, to seek out those who need an advocate proactively?
What a wonderful question, Anne-Marie, that also I think requires another magic wand to recognize those who need help. I wish I have a simple answer to that, especially with Hep B. It's a stigmatized disease. People try to keep to themselves. Sometimes they don't even tell their closest friends or anyone around them about it. So they end up being so isolated. And I think probably the best way is raising awareness within the community, especially the communities that are hardly hit by a certain illness or health outcome or disease. I think targeting communities that are at higher risk, raising the awareness among the community members, trying to elevate the stigma. And again, I've, through a lot of practice, through a lot of exchange with other disease areas, stigma's there, and people like to label each other one way or another. In the 80s, I think, and probably earlier, diabetes was also stigmatized as being the result of a faulty lifestyle, and people are eating too much, and that's why they get diabetes. And it's just the way, I don't know, maybe going back to Dr. Mehran's point about bias and the way that we always like to put a label on what's going on so that we our minds can digest it. So I think raising awareness and trying to eliminate the stigma around any disease is really a key. We might not be able to spot those individuals right away, but if we ourselves deep inside kind of like have this understanding to one another, that might be helpful. I wish there is a clear answer to that then all the problems would be solved, I guess.
For sure. And I certainly will turn the same question over, Alex, you unmuting, so I'll definitely go to you next, but just to acknowledge the work to counter stigma that people deal with every day is an essential starting point, because if people can't discuss what's happening, others can't understand it, and we can't collectively create change. So countering stigma is an essential thing. Alex, please.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. I think I definitely agree with Dr. Ibrahim. It's a challenge without a simple answer. And as I can offer you more of an international kind of coalition perspective that we face. It's not just finding patients, those affected by bladder cancer who may need our help and support, but also simultaneously we're looking for that patient advocate looking to do more in a sense for advocating for themselves, but also driving that change within their community, within the country. So it's a double sort of challenge that we face. And, it's a work in progress, but we're looking different avenues for the moment. But I'm, as that working together coalition sort of perspective that I've shared earlier, I think working in collaboration with physicians is an area I think that can bring great value, because those are the people who probably have quite a big exposure to a patient, to seeing what they are going through. So how can we kind of, what's the right word, employ them or use them for that purpose to connect and to connect these patients who need help to where to find that help, to patient advocates like ourselves here in the group today, and guide them in the right direction. And physicians can be, a treating doctor, a nurse. There's quite a range, I think, with allied professions in cancer care specifically. So I think looking for other partners, other stakeholders that can support you in finding the right people would be my kind of suggestion. And this is something that we're currently trying ourselves around the world in different countries.
I appreciate that. And thinking about this generating question, Dr. Mehran, specifically to come your way, that opportunity to notice people who need an advocate, I'd contend the work you've been doing with Women as One and specific things like the CLIMB program, you're already doing this. Could you tell us a little bit more about the programmatic work that you're doing with, for example, Women as One or something else, because you're leading all over the place?
I try to do this, I think, as somebody, I run an academic research organization and have the ability to have lots of wonderful, talented trainees that work with me, both in our fellowship, but also a huge research fellowship where there is an opportunity for people to be escalated in their careers. And I think that mentorship is a very, very important way for helping some of the talented people who may never get the opportunities to be given opportunities to these talented people. I think we can make a huge, huge, vast difference in medicine. I mean, think about some of these incredibly talented people who never get the opportunity because they don't have good mentors, and that sometimes mentors are called mentors and are using these younger people to do the scut work or the low level work. And then when it comes time to be elevated, they're not being elevated. So it's something that I work at every day. And I call out people who are not doing the same. And I think that's what we all need to do. Sometimes you need to call out people, especially if you're in a senior position. And I think that there should be some way of getting credit for clinicians, physicians, healthcare providers who are advocating, who are promoting, who are then mentoring others to be promoted. That it just is something we all need to do. Sometimes it's thankless work, and thankless work usually doesn't go anywhere. So and I think, like here we are talking about advocacy, and many people say, well, what's in it for me? Oh yeah, you feel good about yourself, but that's not all. And I think it would be nice to have some reward attached to some of the people who are advocating, the people who are mentoring, the people who are going out of their way to make sure that others are also elevated. If we do this in society in all sectors, we would just be in such a much better place than we are today. I really believe that.
That is the truth, and you're modeling it, right? As you say, in almost any domain, the invisible work in professional environments, in home environments, and so on, that is put on people who are historically marginalized is so very much work and can get in the way of other opportunities. So, as I put in the chat, the proactive way that Women as One does this by bringing people into the fold and removing the ask is really something else. Yeah. I would like to conclude by thanking again all three of our panelists for the work you do daily to amplify voices, for sharing your expertise today, for sure, for being here with us and being willing to be part of the community to help improve these systems. So I thank you all. Certainly, Michelle, thank you for the framing remarks that led us into this dialogue and to think about being change leaders. And thank all of you for being here, for asking questions in the chat and supporting each other in the chat, for sure. Just a quick reminder that all of the resources that we mentioned, including, for example, the Global Cancer Coalition's Network report Alex mentioned at the beginning, are linked from the session page with today's resources. And I'll invite you to join us again for our next session in 2 weeks, focused on international health technology assessments and how they impact access in patient preferences. And so with that, I look forward to seeing you then. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with the community.